It is just a huge honor. How lucky could I get to have the executive director of the Arizona Dental Association come over to my house and film a podcast? I've been a big fan of yours. You've been sitting at the helm for, what, 9 years?
Coming up 9 years in September.
Let me read your bio. Kevin Earle has been the executive director of the Arizona Dental Association since 2008. In that role, he serves as a principal lobbyist for dentistry and better oral health care at the state legislature. He is the former executive director of the Arizona Board of Dental Examiners. Before his move to Arizona, he spent 20 years regulating professionals in the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. He was the executive director of the New Jersey Board of Dentistry for many years, and in the past regulated several other categories of healthcare professionals, including the Board of Medical Examiners. He holds a BA in Public Affairs from George Washington University, an MBA from Rutgers University, and a Master's in Public Health with a concentration in Health Policy from Columbia University. Damn, you're an amazing man. I want to start back when I first, so I graduated 30 years ago this May 11th. So this, what is May 11th, Ryan?
That's in 2 days.
That's right.
That's in 2 days? Yeah. So Thursday will mark 30 years. I remember when I got here 30 years ago, the Arizona, back then it was called the Arizona State Dental Association. Right. And the Arizona Board of Examiners, I mean, those guys were at it 24 hours a day. So is it kind of like you worked for, the one side of the coin, and now you went to the dark side, or
I was viewed with suspicion. And then some people say I came to the light, and some people say I came to the dark side. But I think that experience, having worked with the profession and always had a good relationship with the profession, really helped me in my role in regulating the profession, gave me a deep understanding of dentistry, and it really allowed me to make an easy transition. I also worked on Capitol Hill when I first got out of college, and so the lobbying and the regulatory environment was something that I'd always worked within. I think that's really helped as well. And I've had a decent relationship with the Board of Dental Examiners. This year we've had some challenges here in Arizona. One of which we found that the governor wants to move all of the regulated boards under the Department of Health Services. And in that process last year, when the governor wanted to do that, we found out that the dental board was sitting on $5 million of extra money that they have collected over the last several years. And we went back to the board and said, you need to lower license fees. And the board, we went with the Dental Hygiene Association, and the board agreed. And so now we've got lower license fees coming up this year. And then the question came up as to what they were going to do with the extra money that they still had in the bank. And they had the idea that they were going to give it away to charity. And we said, oh, no, you've taken it from your regulated profession. It was given to you to regulate the profession, not to give it away to charity. And asked the board whether or not they wanted to be accepting grant applications and then deciding Solomon-like how they were going to split this money up. And they abandoned that idea, but they were down that pathway for about 4 months. But luckily, we've gone to the legislature, and we've removed language that will help to have further reductions in license fees, and the board will have to live on its savings for the next 3 years, because everybody who renews in the next 3 years is going to pay no renewal fee.
Mine is next month.
Next month, well, you're going to pay only $510. It used to be $650.
Nice. Another thing, going back to the journey, when I got here in '87, there were no dental schools.
Right.
And I remember, so I've seen 2 dental schools get going, and it was kind of that was rocky too, because a lot of dentists didn't want the competition.
Right.
A lot of older dentists said, "Well, who am I going to sell my practice to?"
Right.
What do you think about the rise of private schools? I think, we're probably graduating 1,000 more dentists a year now than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah, this is a challenge, and the expense of dental education has really become a challenge, because they're coming out, the average is $262,000. The dentists that are graduating from our 2 schools, it's more like $500,000 to $600,000.
Because they're both private.
They're both private. It's relatively expensive. That's not to say that they aren't doing a very credible job of graduating good quality dentists. We work very closely with the two dental schools. We have great relationships with our students. In fact, this year we got our students involved in a legislative initiative because, again, going back to figuring out the things that were happening, we discovered that there was something that when they first developed licensure by credential here and allowed people to come from other states, they put a $2,000 fee on a credentialing application. So what was happening is that a young dentist who was coming here that may not take a rev exam, perhaps took the CERTA exam or the credits exam, the board would accept that exam results, but then they would charge them $2,000. So our students were very active in lobbying for the legislation. We had them come and testify before the legislature. And it was a great opportunity to get them involved in, and interested in what's happening at the legislature and this is something that's going to affect their colleagues from across the country, because if someone wants to come to Arizona and they're less than 5 years out of school, they would have had to pay a $2,000 fee. So we've gotten rid of that fee. So we've done, I think, a lot toward license portability.
You know, they always say that you never want to see sausage or laws made.
Yeah, it's
And
not
you-
a pretty sight.
You said when you got out of college you were working on Capitol Hill. A lot of people always ask me, why are you a member of the ADA? And first of all, the ADA has 65% market share. If you look at the Fortune 500, almost no company has 65% market share. I mean, maybe Intel on a microprocessor.
Right.
So when people say the market share is low, I'm like, dude, 65. I'll take 65% of any market. I'll take 65% of the bottled water market. I think it's huge market share. But a lot of people ask me, they always say, why do you do it? And I said, because you have no idea what they're. I see it as, number one, political. Mm-hmm. These kids have no idea that they've invested $500,000 into their sovereign profession. And it's the ADA in D.C. and 50 state societies
Right.
keeping it a sovereign profession. And
Right.
if you took all that away, I mean, like a big issue here is dental therapists in Arizona. So if I graduate from dental school and I'm $500,000 in debt, then they say, well, dental therapists can do all the fillings and stuff like that.
Right.
That's
Yeah, there's a serious flaw in the thinking behind this movement to create dental therapists. And it's taken a different tact here in Arizona. A lot of the questions were on whether or not they could, whether the training was adequate and whether they could operate safely. First of all, we know that they've existed in other states. The only state where they've actually functioned is Minnesota. And Minnesota has 57 that they've graduated, of which only 7 are working in rural areas. So if this is the answer to the access to care problem for people who are in remote areas, there isn't a lot of evidence to suggest that folks are going there. The other thing too is they come in and I think they come in with the wrong diagnosis. They believe that there's a workforce problem here, that we don't have enough dentists. We do have enough dentists. We have, and they'll say, well, only 38% of the dentists in Arizona will accept, quote unquote, Medicaid. Well, the flaw in that argument is you can't just raise your hand and say, I want to be a Medicaid provider and work for Access, one of the Access plans. It's controlled by the managed care organizations that run Access. They have certain network requirements. They're not going to make their network bigger than they need it to be. Access says you need to have geographic coverage, and that's the way the market is controlled for Medicaid. Now, do we have some areas where we have difficulty getting dentists to work in those remote areas? The question is there enough population to support a dental practice there? Clearly there isn't. As my former president, Dr. Brian Poley, says, you don't build donut shops where there ain't no cops. So if there's not a significant enough population to support a dental practice, whether a dental therapist is working there, the bricks and mortar and overhead associated with the dental practice has to have significant enough income to be able to support it and make it viable. It also basically has to be heavily subsidized. So the government basically has to subsidize the delivery of care. And I think that we can be more creative with our existing dental team. We have the tools available in the law to take our most trusted folks that work in our dental office, connect us virtually through teledentistry technology, be able to send an affiliated practice hygienist into a remote area to a senior center or a WIC center or a Head Start center, to be able to screen folks, take intraoral photographs, populate a patient record, take x-rays, transmit them to a dentist, let the dentist preliminarily treatment plan them, and have that person that sees that patient get them started, get them cleaned up, educate them about their oral health, and then try to work on ways in which we can get them into a dental home. So we have, and I see you written down the word EFTA.
Very good. You read that upside
That's
down.
right. I can see it upside down.
Gosh.
That's another thing that we've done. Expanded function dental assistants. We created them in the law 2 years ago. I'm a little frustrated right now because I haven't seen any educational programs cropping up because there is a strong demand for it. There are a number of people that know that by having an expanded function dental assistant working at your side will make you far more efficient. You can deliver more care because you can move to the next patient, finish them up, go back and check the filling and make sure that it's appropriately done. And most people who have worked with expanded function dental assistants tell us that they become more expert than the dentists. That's where, we don't have to do much, but we've got to really figure more creative ways to be able to.
So back to that
allow us to
EFTA,
finish it.
I thought I heard that the next step was when it got passed, then you had to set up an education for them.
Right.
So
right.
you went to what?
So
I
we're
assume
waiting to the
both dental
community
schools, or-
colleges. As a
Community
matter of fact, I
colleges?
have a meeting with the dean at Midwestern University tomorrow to talk about having them set up an EFTA training.
It's a
program.
new dean, isn't it?
Yeah. No, Dr. Smith's been there a while. Well, maybe 3 years.
Yeah, I mean new from when it was started.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Right now there's no EFTAs in Arizona. It's legal, but there's no.
No,
training
but
credential.
one of the things that we did in this legislation this year was to allow the board to recognize someone who has an EFTA credential in another state.
Nice.
So we're trying to mainstream.
I got my assistant licensed EFTA. I bought it on eBay.
Oh, really?
It was $9.
Really?
And it's where I got my Eagle Scout and my black belt.
Or was it a code-approved online program?
So another issue, the hygienist. Some of the states, the hygienist had independent licensure. I believe it was Colorado.
Right.
But it didn't seem like it was very significant. It seemed like everything I would hear is like there were only like not even a dozen.
Yeah, that has really not caught on. And we've worked very closely with the Dental Hygiene Association. This legislation that we got through this year and the legislation that did some work on affiliated practice model a couple of years ago, which included that teledentistry and the EFTA, that was done in collaboration with the Dental Hygiene Association. That's another thing from the past. It used to be that the Dental Hygiene Association and the Dental Association
Right.
were at odds with each other. We found that if we want to do something to improve the oral health of Arizonans, that we need to work together to try to find more creative ways to do
Could
that.
you send a memo to the Democrats and Republicans that they should try that?
Get far more
That they-
accomplished by
Oh,
working
my God.
together.
It's just crazy times we live in, isn't it?
It is.
I want to ask another question about water fluoridation. We don't put public health policies up for a vote for iodizing milk, putting vitamin D in milk, iodizing salt, putting berry, preventing all these additives to bread so you don't have berry. Why do you think of all the public health policies? We don't vote on whether or not we should vaccinate our kids for polio or like say, or iodized salt. We have a whole generation of Americans who don't even know what goiter is.
Right.
They haven't seen, ever since they iodized salt, you haven't seen it. Why do you think that is an election? Why is that
I
for
think
a
it
vote?
goes back to the 50s and 60s when everybody thought that fluoridation was a communist plot. And I guess it developed a history back then. We've still seen challenges to fluoridation. Just this past year, again, we saw it crop back up in Bisbee. I think you'd be amused if the last lady that testified at the hearing in Bisbee said that she was a clairvoyant in town and that she was concerned that the pineal gland was calcified because of fluoridation, and that was the gland through which you communicate with the afterlife. So we were going to have her go from town to town to testify with that information, because I think it would really move people
that's
in
the
the
one-
direction of fluoridation.
I worked a lot on the first campaign back in '89.
I
In
know.
fact, your association gave me the Arizona award for that, and we just had to do it again just a couple of years ago. And it's very interesting because when I'm out there at those debates and things, there's a lot of crazy people in America, and I think it might be as many as 20% of Americans might just be bad shit crazy.
As a matter of fact, I think we've had some success in fluoridation initiatives across the country. I think there were at least 6 communities that had elections in the last 6 months.
One thing I sympathize with those people is like when you'd show them studies for like the CDC or whatever, or the American Dental Association, they just don't trust it. They say that's the ADA is just a shill for dentists, and we want to put it in the water because it'll make all the teeth bad. Then we got to do more dentistry. And the CDC, I mean, I would say there's now less trust among Americans than there was like when I was growing up. I mean, when I was growing up.
And it's so counterintuitive that dentists would be in favor of something that's going to lead to less decay and less work.
But it seems like Americans believed more in America when I was 20 than when I'm now 54. It seems like there's a lot of
skepticism.
A lot of people just they because if you're talking to them and they start with the deal that I don't even trust you. You're buying this stuff from a fertilizer company and you're pouring it in the water and you're doing it to ruin teeth. So once you have no trust, I want to ask you about amalgam, because it seems like the anti-mercury people, whether it's mercury, it just seems like is that filling going to go away? Do you think legally, politically?
I don't think as a filling material it'll go away. I think, given the fact that our Medicaid program is very much geared toward and will only pay for amalgam fillings in a lot of cases. So I don't think it's going to entirely go away. I believe, however, as new dentists come on board who are less familiar with amalgam materials, and as technology develops where there are materials that are more durable, I think we're going to probably see a movement away from amalgam, but I don't think it's going to go away entirely. I don't think it's going to be banned. I think the EPA already, just in the last year, said that it still maintains that it's a safe filling material.
But you know where it's not safe is in the cremation.
When you take it out.
in the cremation of humans. And I keep reading these studies that burning coal is like 50% of atmospheric mercury.
Right.
But they think dental fillings are 6% of atmospheric mercury because of just cremation. And so there's 7.5 billion humans. So how many die each year? How many get cremated? And how many had a bunch of... So I think one of the next steps that dentists should do in all 50 states is get a law passed that you can't cremate someone until a dentist or a hygienist, someone's got to go in there and extract. It's kind of creepy, but someone's got to go in there. But they do.
I've had the question with respect to gold, but not with respect to amalgam fillings.
Yeah, they're all 50 states and the ADA. They really need to address that because so much of the anti-mercury stuff is just laughable science. I mean, it's just laughable science. But when you look at the cremating of amalgam, that's I think it's real. I don't think you can cremate amalgam.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
I haven't thought about that.
You haven't thought about that? I got a new one. I got one you hadn't thought about.
I see that.
My gosh, that's pretty cool.
A new initiative next year.
So where do you think dental therapists? Where do you think that's going to end up?
Well, the Pew Foundation has submitted a Sunrise application last year. In Arizona, if you're going to expand the scope of practice, or if you're going to create a new regulated healthcare professional, you have to go through a process. And there has to be an application filed by September, and then there's a hearing before what's called the Health Committee of Reference. And we went through that process this past year. And the hearing was 2.5 hours long. And we presented our case, they presented their case, there was competing testimony, and the bill, it didn't move forward because there was only 1 vote in favor of it and 8 votes against it. And so a bill wasn't introduced. There was some movement during the course of this legislative session of someone trying to sneak in a bill by a legislative process called the Strike Everything Amendment. That was quashed. But we know that the Pew Foundation is still pouring money, that they've had a press conference recently to advance the dental therapists again. We're going to see another Sunrise application. They've been trying to enlist the support of a number of other groups. One group called the Goldwater Institute, which is a conservative and libertarian kind of a think tank here in Arizona. And what their position is that they believe that this is, quote unquote, the free market solution to the access to care problem. And to which I respond, hey, wait a minute, we're the free market. If we thought that this was going to lower the cost of dental care, then dentistry would have embraced it. But we clearly know that the cost of the person that is providing the service isn't going to materially change the cost curve on dental procedures. And it is certainly not something that's going to significantly affect the cost. And there's no evidence to suggest in any place where dental therapists have been prominent that the cost of dental care has gone down.
A lot of these kids might not even know anything about the Pew Foundation. How would you describe the Pew Foundation?
Well, there's a lot of good things that happen with the Pew Foundation. They do a lot of research on public policy, on health policy. We don't know where their money comes from.
You don't know where the money comes from?
No, we don't know where their money comes from. As a matter of fact, if you pull up their 990 form, you'll find out that the sources of their income are blanked out. So we don't know. For example, it could be the insurance industry that's funded this in an effort to.
Oh, you're not going to go with George Soros?
Could be.
Isn't he the funder of every conspiracy?
Well, it could be. You never know. You never know. But we really don't know. The Pew has taken on this as a cause célèbre, and they're in like 20 states fighting this battle. The other challenge that we talk about is the fact that dental therapy is different in any state that has adopted it. So it's one form in Minnesota. They've gotten a bill passed in Maine, but the bill says that we have a new dental school here in Maine, and we're not going to do any dental therapy until we know what the impact of the new dental school is. And let's see whether or not the dentists that come out from the University of New England are going to be significantly solving the access to care problem by working in remote areas. So it's not proceeded in Maine. A bill's passed in Vermont. It's not operational yet. It has an entirely different model. The model that's in Alaska is an entirely different model. So we don't have any consistency into what the scope of training is. There are CODA standards for education, only because the state of Minnesota said there should be standards. And that's what they're proposing here, that the educational model would be an 18-month training program, and it's got to include certain components. But the two dental schools, I think, have been approached, and we don't know whether or not we're hopeful that they won't adopt.
Do you see these private schools ramping up even higher than they are now? I mean, 10 years from now, how many more dental schools do you think there'll be? Do you think the curve will flatten out?
I think they're going to hit the point of no return. It's so expensive to set up a new dental school, and it's very capital intensive. The faculty is expensive. There's a new one now opening down in El Paso, I believe, that is allegedly chartered to deal with access to care issues. And so we'll see whether or not that means that dentists will be produced that will work in remote areas in New Mexico. And,
little known trivia about El Paso. Being a dentist here 30 years, I had the last 3 years. I've had several patients that were they had their job. They were a territory manager for Texas and Arizona, and I'd say, "Why Texas and Arizona?" And they go, "It's half the distance from El Paso to Phoenix it is from El Paso to Houston."
Right.
Can you imagine how big that state is?
Yeah.
They go, "It's 6 hours for me to drive El Paso to Phoenix."
Yeah.
It's 12 hours to drive El Paso to Houston.
Right.
That is really a big deal. Is this overly simplistic? Some people say that the access to care problem would be solved instantly if dental schools would only accept kids from rural America. That you can't bring in a kid from San Fran, LA, and Miami and tell them to go to Bumblebutt, Iowa. But if you only accept a class of kids from the rural, they'll go back to rural.
Well, I think A.T. Still University here in Arizona operates on that philosophy because a lot of the folks that have come into dental school, for example, they have the largest percentage of Native American students of any dental school in the country. And I asked Dean Dillenberg how many of those dental students have gone back to their communities. He said every one of them. So I think that works. I've done a lot of work with the tribes here, and we've encouraged them to identify promising students, and there are programs that can help to mainstream them, to help them get into dental school and support them throughout that process. So we clearly want to try to encourage folks that are committed to their homes to be able to come back and provide services there. Part of the frustration within the Indian Health Service and even with the tribally run facilities is that they will bring people in there on a loan forgiveness program, but as soon as they're done with the program, they're gone. So there's no continuity of care there.
But it's so obvious. Who else would be more likely to go practice on an Indian reservation than someone born there?
That makes absolute sense.
I mean, who would be born and raised in Phoenix and go live in Eloy?
Right.
I mean, you got to get.
No, I completely understand it. There's some other interesting things that we're working on. In Navajo Nation, for example, we've gotten a greater understanding of prevention. And overlaid in the Navajo Nation or in most tribal communities are what are called community health workers that are embedded in their diabetes programs, their smoking cessation programs, cancer, cardiac programs. But there's an oral health piece to all of that. So we are currently, the ADA is funding a group of members of the community health worker program, and Navajo Nation are training them as community dental health coordinators at Central New Mexico Community College. That way they become effectively oral health social workers. And they work very closely side by side with all the folks that are working in those programs to help them understand, to take better control of their oral health, to be more focused on prevention, to understand the importance of nutrition, the passing of bacteria from mother to child, all those things that they need to have a better understanding of, I think ultimately will start to change the burden of disease among our tribal folks, because we really need to have very robust prevention activities. It's not all about drilling and filling, it's about reducing disease.
You know what I think had the biggest, in the 30 years of what I've seen, you know what I think has had the biggest effect on those reservations and reducing disease?
Is?
The success of the LDS church in the Navajo community. They've gone
very in.
Oh my God! I think they've recruited a third of the Navajos into their religion.
Really? Okay.
I mean, every dentist I talk to, and whenever I'm up there in Tuba City, they say you can just drive down the street and say LDS, 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 because if you just get them to quit drinking, I mean, so much disease goes away. You can't drink and be an LDS.
That's true. I mean, the diabetes levels are sky high.
But diabetes, if you're drinking a fifth of vodka every day,
well, it turns to sugar.
Yeah, it's just liquid sugar.
Sure.
So yeah, I actually think the LDS church has had more impact on that nation than anything. Just amazing.
So we do know that, however, that the decay rates among the Navajo children are the highest in the country. And so, working closely with them, it's not all about the delivery system. The delivery system is, between you, me, and the lamppost is particularly dysfunctional. When you have to make an appointment then you have a dysfunctional delivery system. At Phoenix Indian Medical Center, you have to be on a line, not online, on the first Tuesday of the month to get an appointment for dental care that could be weeks and weeks and weeks away. But
wasn't Arizona home of the first Native American Indian dentist?
Yes, Dr. George Blue Spruce.
I want to get him on the show so bad. Do you have contact information?
I do. Dr. Blue Spruce is a good friend.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
He was the first Native American Indian dentist in
Yes,
America.
he was.
Oh, I so want to.
He was. He has so many stories.
I know, and I've seen him. He's always speaking at these different functions, and
Yeah.
he's quite a great speaker.
He's amazing. And Dr. Dillenberg is retiring too, so you may want to talk to him before he disappears.
I did a podcast with
Did you?
I did, yeah, very very well received.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, I did another podcast with Regina Cobb, who's a dentist in Arizona.
Who was my good friend who hired me.
Really? And I want to tell that because, again, you people that come out with $500,000 of student loans by not investing in your profession in the ADA membership is a really bad idea, because if you just lost all these legal battles, you're not going to be holding much when 30 years down the line. And then people always say, well, they don't agree with something like this. Dude, what percent of the stuff do you not agree with your mom and dad? They're still your mom and dad. They're their only mom and dad. And the ADA is your only mom and dad. If you don't like it, get involved. But I want to ask you, because a lot of these millennials might not realize, but there are a lot of dentists who just get involved in politics. Regina Cobb was amazing. In fact, we've never had a dentist president or in the Senate, but we have 4 in the Congress right now.
We do.
And one of them's from Arizona, Paul
Yes,
Gosar.
right.
So do you know all 4 of those guys?
Well, Paul I know quite well. The other members, as a matter of fact, one of the other dentist members was presiding over the American Health Care Act vote the other day. Dr. Mike Simpson from Idaho. I noticed that he was up on the dais pounding the gavel.
He's the longest serving dentist, right?
Yes, he's been
From
there.
Idaho?
Yes, yeah, he's been there for quite a while. Then there's a new guy from Texas named Babbitt, and a guy named Mike Ferguson from Georgia, who was just elected.
Yeah, that is. I actually went to Creighton with Paul. We both lived in Swanson Hall.
Did you?
I was on the 9th floor. He was on the 8th floor. So tell the story. Like Regina Cobb. What makes one of your okay? So you said Arizona has 4,000 licensed dentists. 3,200 of them are active. 2/3 of them are ADA members. What is the journey for a dentist to get involved politically?
Well, Gina was, first of all, she was president of the association, but she was always involved in our Council on Government Affairs. She was the chair of our Council on Government Affairs during our most successful run of legislative victories in the state legislature. So that's really what gave her the bug. She was a member of the Board of Education in Kingman and was very active in her community and had a wonderful reputation. She is well loved at the Capitol. She's the vice chair of the Health Committee. She's the chair of the Health Subcommittee and the Appropriations Committee. She was the one that led the restoration of kids' care in the Arizona budget last year, with a lot of
And what
political
what percent of this is
repercussions.
volunteerism versus making money doing
Well,
this?
you don't make money doing this, and
I know.
the salary of a state legislator is $24,000 a year. So you do it at considerable sacrifice.
It's just their drive and passion.
It is, yeah, it is.
Because I was wondering, like Paul Gosar. I mean, he was a successful dentist in Flagstaff, Arizona,
He was.
and now he's got to consider himself living in.
And it's funny that
crazy
his
times.
first interest in legislative activity happened when the dental therapy challenge started in Alaska in the American Dental Association, and Paul was on the Council on Government Affairs at ADA, and that's really what gave him the bug. He's had considerable success this year, actually, because one of the things that he's been pushing for quite a while is the repeal of the McCarran-Ferguson Act.
Right.
And
I want him to come on the show and talk about it.
We got it
email
through
for
that.
him?
Yeah, sure. We got it out. It has passed the House of Representatives.
But I don't think 90% of the dentists even understand.
Well, see, the McCarran-Ferguson Act is an interesting thing because there are only 2 industries that are exempt from antitrust laws. And one is Major League Baseball, and the other one is health insurance. And this goes back to the 1940s. When they tried to create health insurance companies, and they said, well, they're going to need to work together, so we're not going to worry about antitrust laws with respect to health insurance companies. So even though two dentists can't talk about what fees they're going to charge, insurance companies can talk about what fees, what reimbursement they have. And the repeal of the McCarran-Ferguson Act will put some transparency.
Is it done? Is it a done deal?
It is passed the House of Representatives. It's got to get through the Senate now.
But will it?
We are hoping and praying. It may be incorporated into this change in the healthcare.
The healthcare industry is a lot of weird stuff. Like take Delta. It's a non-profit.
Right.
I've never seen so much money, sales, and profit than a non-profit. I mean, would you say there's a lot of profit in that non-profit?
It's funny. Well, we don't really talk about dental insurance because I don't call it insurance. I call it a payment help assistance program. So it's really not insurance, and it depends on the nature of their book of business. It used to be, I think, more profitable. Depends on how their networks are functioning, and there's been some challenges here with our own Delta. There was a recent issue that just happened in California. I'm sure you may have read about it, that California Dental Association participated in a lawsuit against their Delta because they had unilaterally canceled all the contracts of all their premier providers and made them PPO dentists. And it cost the California Dental Association $3 million to pursue that, but they ultimately prevailed.
And that money, did that come from the Tooth Fairy, a unicorn, or members paying dues?
That California Dental Association now owns a malpractice insurance company, and they're a lot more well-heeled than we are. But
they also own that 22-story building, right?
They do. Yeah, it's the largest, tallest building in Sacramento.
That was a smart move.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and Utah dentists have their own dental malpractice.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like 90% of all the dentists in Utah have the same dental malpractice, and they only cover Utah.
Yeah.
So that California,
but they've got the financial resources to be able to pursue this kind of litigation. Ultimately, they're going to get back $1.5 million of it from Delta, and that'll be returned back to the members that they were suing for. So that was a big win. But insurance is differently regulated in California. It's not regulated like it is here.
Well, I guess I was at
here. It's essentially unregulated.
I was wondering about with regards to Delta. I just wonder, everything in life has a trade-off. Mm-hmm. I wonder what the trade-off would be if all the nonprofits were publicly traded. I mean, I bet there's good and bad in both systems.
Well, if you're a not-for-profit corporation, again, depends on how they're regulated. In California, there is a medical loss ratio that they are required to have. So they've got to maintain a medical loss ratio of about 80 to 85%. Here, that's not regulated. So you could have an insurance company that would be here, could have a medical loss ratio of 60%, which means they're spending 40% on infrastructure and salaries. And 60% of it of the premium dollar is going to benefits. But medical loss ratios aren't regulated in Arizona the way they are in California. And we're seeing a movement in a lot of states to move toward legislation that would mandate medical loss ratios.
Another thing I noticed in California, didn't they were complaining that a lot of people weren't participating in their state Medicaid program for dentistry, but they raised the fee schedule. And it attracted a lot more dentists.
Yeah, yes. There's been some major reforms, I think, that have happened in California. They were operating basically, the Southern California and Northern California were separate, and one was a capitation plan, the other one was a fee-for-service plan. The reimbursement levels were low. There's been some recent studies from ADA that basically are looking at what Medicaid reimbursement rates are. And also overlaying the supply of dentists and whether or not they've got high utilization. Here, our published rate is 54% of UCR, but in reality, that's what's called the fee-for-service fee. Those dollars go to these 9 different managed care organizations, and the fees, the reimbursement levels are about 38% of UCR. So it's relatively low, and it's challenging to be a Medicaid participant here. We have challenges with access, although they've worked with us in the last year. We've gone to them and said, listen, You've got to alleviate some of the burdens of extra paperwork and pre-authorizations that you're requiring. And they've worked to try to adopt a uniform practice matrix so that the rules are the same from one plan to another. We had some issues involving credentialing. With some plans, it was taking up to 120 days to credential a new dentist. If you extend an offer to a new grad and it's taking 120 days, that was entirely unreasonable. So we've gotten them to change some of the credentialing and actually create a fast track process for a new grad to be credentialed within 15 days. It's not rocket science to credential someone with an insurance company.
So, a lot of kids, when they come out of school, they don't know the difference between Medicaid and Medicare. Medicare is the federal thing, like your grandma's Medicare for her health insurance, whereas Medicaid is state by state. And it's one of the things they found out with Obamacare, like in Arizona, everybody calls their Medicaid access, and they had no idea that was part of Obamacare. Mm-hmm. I mean, that it had a lot of money and subsidies from Obamacare.
Right.
I know that I don't want to get political. You should never talk about religion, sex, politics, or violence. But right now, the Congress is trying to repeal Obamacare, which is 50 state different Medicaids. Does that really have a dental impact?
Yes, it does. First of all, in the Medicaid program, children are the only ones that are mandated to be covered under Medicaid. In Arizona, we only cover kids. We had no coverage for adults. We did many years ago. In 2009, the state decided that they were looking for quarters in the sofa cushions and decided to eliminate the adult dental benefit. So that's an optional benefit. So you're not required by the federal government to cover adults under Medicaid. There's also an enhanced match. So the Medicaid program is a partnership between the federal government and the state government. And usually the match is about a 3-to-1 match. So for every dollar that Arizona comes up with, the feds come up with 3. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, there was inducements and a big fight in the legislature to expand Medicaid to people that were under 138% of the federal poverty level. And if the state would move forward with that, they would cover 90% of the costs. So we went into this expansion mode. The fear is now with this American Health Care Act that they'll significantly clamp down on the dollars that come in to cover our Medicaid population, which means that the folks that are in that expansion category are probably going to be the first ones to have challenges obtaining coverage. I don't know where these folks are going to go to get health insurance, and many of them have significant pre-existing conditions that are now covered under Medicaid that if they try to obtain insurance in the private market, that's going to be a challenge. Now, those adults that were covered under that thing have no adult dental coverage. However, we were successful this year getting the governor to request the legislature to put our adult emergency dental benefit back. And we just got that through the state budget last week. So starting on October 1st, adults will now, under Medicaid, will have a limited adult emergency benefit that will cover root canals on their 14 anterior teeth or extractions, and it's up to an annual cap of $1,000. But at least they'll have something, and they won't have to go to an emergency room where they're just going to become antibiotic resistant and opioid dependent. And so hopefully we're going to see that movement out of emergency rooms and back into dental clinics and dental offices where they can get coverage.
You know, Kevin, you're still a young spring chicken, but you've been in this business for years. I mean, you used to be the executive director of the New Jersey Board of Dentistry, including the Board of Medical Examiners. You have a BA in Public Health, Washington. How long have you been in healthcare government space?
Well, my first switch to the healthcare space was when I went to the Board of Medical Examiners in 1994.
1994. See, I wasn't even born yet.
Right.
And that's how long you've been in it. I was, but the question I wanted to ask you is, when I lecture around to all these advanced countries, Why is healthcare always such a controversial issue in America? I mean, it's just not in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, Germany, France, Sweden, Switzerland, Ireland. I mean, you could just go on and on and on, and all these single payer countries do it for half the cost, and we do it for not only twice the cost, but 8 times the controversy. What is it about the American journey that why it's such a...
Yeah, this is a constant challenge. When you go to other countries, I spent some time in Denmark a few years back, and I was in Norway, and I said, do you mind paying so much in taxes? They said, no, we don't mind paying so much in taxes, because if we lose our jobs, we know we're going to have coverage. We're not going to lose our home. We're not going to be able to, we're always going to be able to get health care, and the government will help us find a job and get ourselves back on our feet again. So we don't mind spending that, because we know that we're going to be safe. We're also very happy. In Denmark, for example, is the happiest country on earth. So I don't know why we're so afraid of being happy. Because if we didn't have these concerns and these challenges,
but where does it come from? Does it come from? Is it because Americans, for some reason, don't like their government or government period than other countries?
There's a whole suspicion about government. You would think we have allegedly the greatest government in the world, and most democratic, but we're so afraid to move forward and to be more progressive.
I also think the high tax thing is a
that's a big issue here in Arizona.
But it's actually it's a joke, really, because like in Scandinavia, they'll pay half in taxes, but most people are working for $40 an hour, so they'll net 20.
Right.
So you come to America, most people are working $10 to $15 an hour,
right,
and you might only pay 25% taxes, but you're only netting 10. Right. I'd rather pay twice as much taxes and net 20 than half as much taxes and net 10. I mean, it's net.
Yeah.
Who cares what your gross is? And these employees, they don't even look at their gross. I've paid my employees for 30 years, and if you ever ask them how much you make, they only say the net number. They never look at the gross, the FICA matching.
Right.
So I don't know. I just think...
or the cost of their employee benefits and all that other stuff. And I see with my own employees, and and I run an organization where we have 18 employees, and they're...
Who has 18 employees?
The Dental Association.
Oh, you guys have 18 employees?
And our dental foundation and our clinic downtown.
And is Terry Zalowski your favorite employee of all of them?
He is.
He is an amazing man. I love that guy. I love Terry.
He's going to listen to this podcast.
Is he? Terry. Big shout out. Terry's an amazing man. So give your pitch. Well, let me say this. It's a common thing. Okay, so you have 2/3 membership. So you have 65% for national, state, which I give it an A. I mean, like I say, and the Fortune 500. American Airlines. The number one airline in America is Southwest Airlines. They have 27% market share.
Right.
What would Southwest Airlines do to get 65% market share? But some of these kids come out of school. They say, Kevin, I'm $500,000 in debt. I can't join these things. What would you say to that kid?
I would say that you're coming out of school and you're alone, and you shouldn't have to go and face the challenges that you're going to be seeing in the rest of your career alone. And that's the concept of a dental association, is that you have a cadre of folks around you. You get to understand more. You become a better dentist. You have relationships that you build with other colleagues to get to know who are the best specialists to refer to, where are the best opportunities to advance my career, and to know that we're as close as your phone with whatever you need. Not to mention the fact that you're going to get discounts on your malpractice insurance, and you're going to get disability insurance that's going to be with you for the rest of your career. Those kinds of other things.
Don't you have a supply deal too?
Yes, and we have a dental supply company where you can save $16,000 a year on your dental supplies
who's that
in your
from?
practice. It's a company called Source One, which is based here in Arizona.
By my buddy Ahmad Shams.
Yes, he's a good friend of ours, and he's moved into many other states because we want to provide those opportunities that are going to be able to save people money. And know that you're going to have a support network around you, and that we're going to be the ones that are going to be defending you when you get a threat from the dental therapy group, or when there is something that's a challenge that we're dealing with. We've got the power to go down to the legislature, just like we did with the students' legislation this year with changing that $2,000 credentialing fee. There we are, we're saving them $2,000 right up in the front. And then even what we're doing with the dental board fees for the next 3 years. People aren't going to have to pay a renewal fee for the next 3 years because we were vigilant and stayed on top of the fact that the dental board was collecting too much money.
I can never remember the ADA economist's name. Marco
Vujicic.
Marco, M-A-R-K-O?
Marco Vujicic. He's our chief economist.
What is that? Marco, is that?
I don't know what country he's from, but he is brilliant.
He is freakishly overqualified. I mean, he comes from the World Health Organization, the United Nations. I mean, how did the ADA get one of the smartest economists? I mean, the most credentialed. But anyway, I was wondering, I just sent you an email. I was wondering, there's a big thread on Dentaltown, and it's called An Open Letter to the ADA. But basically, this guy is saying that in August of 2008, President Bush signed this long-term reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, this revision of federal student loan rules enshrined dentists. But anyway, what he's saying on this deal is that when physicians have $500,000 in student loans, there's all these programs for repayment and all this stuff like that. And when it was done, dentists were not real doctors, were more like Dr. Pepper and Dr. Seuss and Dr. Dre, and we weren't included in this.
Right.
But I was wondering, I've read it several times. I'm not smart enough to know the details, but I just emailed to you, but do you think you or Marco could read that thread on dentistry? Because it's exploded. I mean, there's like thousands of views and comments, and and it's so funny because Americans are so anti-government. Some of these kids with $500,000 in debt don't even want the government to help them just because they hate the government.
Right.
But anyway, is there any way?
Well, this is one of the big issues that we fought for in Washington. This year, the American Student Dental Association and the American Dental Association were there together for the first time and lobbying Congress to deal with student debt and student loan issues. One of the weird things that are in federal law is that you can only refinance your student loan debt one time. Now that's ridiculous. If there's an opportunity to take advantage of lower interest rates, there is no way that there should be a restriction on refinancing your student debt. And as a matter of fact, the ADA has a great program to allow students to do that, consolidate their debt, save significantly on their interest rate, and it's only available to members. The other thing that we're dealing with is the fact that there are two kinds of loans: a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan. Well, when you go into dental school, you can't get a subsidized loan, which means you're accruing interest all the time you're in dental school. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have a subsidized loan that would allow you to defer your interest payments until you graduate, because you end up with an extra $100,000 of interest on top of the money that you borrowed.
But Kevin, are we getting? I mean, how many countries have you been to that you really liked vacationing at? You said you went to Denmark.
Yes.
How many countries do you think you've been to that you really
Denmark,
enjoyed?
I've been to Greece, I've been to Italy, I've been to France.
I mean, I'm not kidding us. I mean, I know everybody thinks I'm kidding, but aren't we getting close? I mean, to where a kid walks out of school $500,000 in debt and can't bankrupt to think, you know what? I think I'm just going to move to Greece or
Right.
Auckland, New Zealand. I mean, that kid is approaching and then sometimes they'll marry their sweetie in the class. And these guys are 24 and $1 million in debt. At that point, doesn't it just look nice to say, I think I'm going to move to
just
Copenhagen?
walk away from this. Right.
I mean,
right.
has
are
anybody
we-
done that, or
Yeah.
do I just have a very criminal mindset? Because
Well, I'm also fearful for these young folks who may get induced into working into scenarios where they are overdiagnosing and they're engaging in activity just because they've got a bill to pay at the end of the month. And I think we're seeing a propensity of folks to engage in things and try to induce patients to do things because they've got a huge nut to make at the end of the month. So we pride on dentistry as having the only profession that has a strong code of ethics, but yet we're building a scenario here where it's just putting people into untenable positions that's going to move them in the direction of doing things that are entirely not patient-centric and not good for the profession, because people will go to another dentist down the street and they say, well, this guy says I have 10 fillings that need fixing, and in reality, that's not the case.
are you getting more feedback that some of these corporate centers that a lot of members are doing second opinions on, and they're told they have a big treatment plan and they don't, or
Well, there's
are you
always
kind of referring to that, or do you think
no.
corporate's
I
doing a good
think
job?
I think even in someone in a private practice where they have that economic pressure, and they talk to some practice guru that gives them the idea that they can go ahead and do this, and it's all focused on making money, but it's not focused on doing the best thing for patients.
How is you've been in this in '94? So how many years from '94 to 2017?
I don't know. I can't do math in my
I
head
took
anymore.
geometry. Let's say 9, 10, 11, 23 years. You've been in this 23 years. So you remember when Orthodontic Centers of America was publicly traded and there was a dozen on NASDAQ. They all imploded.
Right.
They went away. Corporate's back now. They've been flying for 10 years. A lot of people say they're about 12%. It's how you define corporate. I mean, a lot of dentists are incorporated, but they have one office. But I'm talking about the 35 chains who have more than 50 locations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's good? They're 12% of the market. Do you think in 20 years or 10 years they'll double that to?
I think it's absolutely growing, and I think we also see a dynamic where dentists are coming out of school in debt and they want to make sure that they make a good salary, but they don't want to be bothered with the business aspects of their practice. And this is a good answer for them. Somebody else takes care of those issues. So they take care of the billing and the administration and the personnel.
But when you dig deeper, though, it seems like their main problem is dentist turnover. I mean, some of these corporate chains. I mean,
in
some of those guys can hire 20 dentists.
I think the models are changing.
you-
I think the models are providing better opportunities for equity investment on the part of the dentists that are working there. And I think that leads to a little more long-term stability. We're seeing a lot of market penetration of a lot of these larger organizations, particularly here in Arizona, where it's okay for a non-dentist to own a practice as long as they're registered with the Board of Dental Examiners. But Marko Vujicic has some statistics recently that he's talked about as to where the marketplace is and where folks are being employed, and we're seeing that among the younger demographic, particularly among women who may be only working part-time, that these are good options for them because they can have that work-life balance and be able to work together.
But if you haven't had a kid yet, just don't do it. Just don't do it. 27% of baby boomers had no children. And every time I look at my 4 boys, I just think, why wasn't I in that fourth, Ryan? Just kidding, Ryan. I want to ask another really, really hot topic. In Texas, an implantologist was declaring that he was a specialist, and the Texas Dental Association, your equivalent in Texas, I guess it went to court, and the court's
The Texas Board, actually.
was it not the Texas Dental Association? It was the Texas Board of Dental Examiners.
Right.
And it looks like, is it too overly simplistic to say that specialties have been thrown out of court?
Yeah, I think it is a little oversimplistic. And there has been a movement of some groups to form a separate certifying body to certify specialists. There's been a lot of talk about this at the ADA level. There's been a lot of movement toward rethinking the process for declaring a specialty. Right now, it requires a vote of the House of Delegates, which makes it a political process, and it really should be, the decision should be made on the merits of whether or not someone has had an academic program and training of sufficient rigor to be able to call themselves a specialist. And there's wide variation in terms of, what educational criteria people use. Some people say it's only 400 hours of CE, and other people, they have to go into a residency program for several years and, have so much patient experiences and go through an accreditation process. There's I think a vast difference between, what people might call a specialist. I think the question is how someone is perceived by the public to be a specialist. I think the public needs to understand the difference. And I think there is rigor to the process that ADA employs, but it is undergoing some reform and some consideration at the ADA level.
Yeah, and the answer, it should just be what is best for the patient. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I was going to a doctor, I would want the definition for me. I mean, if I had a rare disease and someone said I specialize in that disease, or that surgery, I'd want that to be the real deal. Right.
There's a lot of movement too. The Federal Trade Commission has gotten particularly aggressive after the big case that went before the Supreme Court a few years back from North Carolina, where the dental board went after teeth whitening kiosks with cease and desist letters, and ultimately the case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Federal Trade Commission prevailed and said they were acting in an anti-competitive manner, and that they didn't have the legal authority to go after the teeth whitening because they were market participants who were the board members, and they didn't have effective state supervision. They're independent of the governor. So what we've seen since that time is a lot of movement state by state to create some mechanism of supervision of the regulatory boards, because the regulatory boards are market participants. And we're seeing some things happening here as well. Governor Ducey doesn't like the fact that they're all independent boards and they're composed of market participants. So a lot of the things that he has been concerned about fall into that category. There's been some legislation this year to give them some oversight. And I think the movement, the idea that they're going to bring all the licensing boards under the Department of Health Services is an effort to sort of create that shield of supervision to make sure that people don't get out of hand. Because there's clearly opportunity for people to crowd other people out of the market. And to disqualify people who may be otherwise qualified for a license, and just because they don't like the way his hat is tilted
and the board, there's no jury or appeal or.
Well, you can go to court, and
you can?
That's your only option here. So if you want to appeal a board decision, you got to go to Superior Court.
And they got to hear the case too.
Right, and it's a long process. And if you disagree with what that court says, you got to go to the Court of Appeals.
Last question. I can't believe we've already got an hour and 3 minutes. You're so kind to do this. When I meet dentists around the world, one of the silliest terms I think is the United States of America. I mean, when you go to Europe, no one says, "Oh, I live in the EU." No one would compare Germany to Greece, Portugal to Sweden, Norway. And then a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I visited America," and I always say, "Really? Where did you go?" And they always say the same thing. "I went to the Greater New York meeting." And I'm like, "Did you ever leave Manhattan?" And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Man, what a weird vision to think America is Manhattan." I mean, they and I always say to myself, I chuckle like,
No, it's really New Jersey where I'm from.
But that's that was my final question. You did all of this in New Jersey, and now you're doing it here. Is dentistry and state politics, is it really different in New Jersey to Arizona? Is it like two different countries, or is it pretty much all the same?
It's very similar. And right this year I'm the president of all the executive directors in the United States.
Well, congratulations.
Well,
how
thank
did
you.
you get that?
Just moved up the ladder. Somebody asked, and I was stupid enough to volunteer.
So you're the president of all the...
Right. So we share information all the time. The things that we face in one state are similar all across the United States. And that's the function of the ADA, is to keep us all abreast and to bring us together. It's, we're all dealing with similar kinds of issues. The politics is different depending on whether you're a conservative state or a liberal state. New York State's I read all their magazines from other states, and I look and see what issues they're dealing with at the legislature. California's, they're all Democrats in California. It's a whole different world over there. Here, we've got very strong conservative Republican legislature, but that doesn't mean that we can't be successful, and that we can't talk logically, and that we can't stand up for what's right. And we've gotten an awful lot done in the last 8 or 9 years, and I'm pretty proud of our record. And it's significant, and that's why I think every dentist should be a member. Because we're out there fighting the good fight.
I do too. And it makes me so mad when somebody will find something wrong and then quit, and it's just like, quit and do what? Just throw in the towel forever? I mean,
Right.
My mom and dad cried when I graduated. That's what the profession meant to my mom and dad. And I think when you retire, when kids walk out of dental school, their parents should cry too. I mean, it's a sovereign profession.
It is.
It's very, very different. Last question though, but wouldn't you say that what % of the dentists in New Jersey were part of the mob and the Sopranos and the mafia? Was it most of them?
Well, my own grandfather was hit over the head and thrown in a lake, which I found out when I went to Italy.
Seriously?
Yeah, sure. Because all during Prohibition, he was basically ran a speakeasy, and I had to go all the way to Italy to find out that happened.
Speaking of Prohibition, there's a lot of people talking on Dentaltown. There's a lot of this medical marijuana, which is the end of Prohibition of marijuana. There's a lot of dentists in like Colorado and these states that legalize it that have a medical use for the marijuana. But a lot of people are wondering, what does the board think about this? What would if you got sued, like you did something wrong, and then they came out, well, I have pain, and I'm on medical marijuana for pain,
Right.
for fibromyalgia or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's going to eventually open up a lot of cobwebs.
This is going to be an interesting time to see with respect to all healthcare professionals. I mean,
if you had to have a bypass, would you want your cardiologist to smoke pot that morning?
I think he'd be in there for an awful long time trying to fish around in there and find the right thing. I'm not sure I would have a lot of confidence in it.
Yeah, but he might legally have the right.
It could. This is I think on the regulatory side an issue that I'm sure people have been thinking about for quite some time. I haven't seen any issue that's occurred here in Arizona. It would, whether or not someone has a medical marijuana card or not, I think the board would look upon it as considering it being impaired and practicing while impaired. And that's not the only way to control pain. But it could also be that you could be impaired by the use of, medications. And we do have, and generally speaking, most of the impairment issues that come before a dental board relate to self-prescribing, self-medicating, and dealing with that, oftentimes starting with back issues. So posture is
it more opioids or is it more alcohol?
I would say that a good percentage of it is opioids.
What percent would you say opioids versus
Well,
alcohol?
it would be hard to say. I mean, I haven't done any research to say what percentage is what. I would say that oftentimes folks come to the attention of the dental board because they had a driving while under the influence charge that and that's generally how they get caught. And
during the DUI, they
the
find out.
DUI, and they're required by law to report it to the board.
So when they do a DUI, then if you flunk that, then they check for.
You flunk that, then no. I think that's oftentimes the way people get caught up into the web. Usually, someone who is self-prescribing, it may be a colleague that reports them, and they can report them and maintain the confidentiality of someone. And there is a confidential program now here in Arizona. When I first came here, I felt like it was hanging justice, because you had to stand up in a public meeting and admit that you had a problem with drugs or alcohol, and you had to come back on a periodic basis and report back to the board, and the public could be there and TV cameras could be there. And luckily in the last couple of years we've gotten wiser, that programs like this that treat this as a disease, and we want to encourage folks to get well and to recover. So programs are now confidential, but there's always the stick or the hammer above your head of a potential disciplinary action and a license suspension that tends to keep folks on the straight and narrow. And it's, I think, extraordinarily successful. It's very rare that you now see dental board issues that come up in public disciplinary orders. They're rare.
Even our music about that is clandestine, like Sade's Taboo. That was about her love for heroin. Waiting on a Friend by the Rolling Stones. Sixpence, There She Goes Again. Even those songs were kind of clandestine lyrics. They didn't want to really go public with what they were singing about.
I just think we've gotten to a better place with respect to dealing with impairment issues and in the regulatory environment. When I was at the medical board in New Jersey, we moved toward a confidential program, and there was eyes put on anyone that was in that program. They were masked by identity. The only person who knew who the person was myself as the executive director of the board, so that I could double check and make sure that there wasn't any issues of criminal activity or anything that would have meant that if we had a pattern of complaints about patient safety. So we would bring that to the table to decide whether or not it was appropriate for someone to stay in that confidential program. But we've moved away from the public nature of these things, and I think we're in a much better place here in Arizona. But it was scary when I first got here. I said, you had 3 minutes to stand before the board and state your case, and then when the axe would fall, that was the end. Or they would just hit the button and into the gallows you go. But I think it's a much better place. I had a great experience when I was, I don't know how much time we have here.
No, we can go 40 days, 40 nights.
I had a great experience with a situation involving a dentist that was mixing the cherry-flavored Demerol with his water bottle. And had been caught by his dental assistant, dental hygienist, and they went to the other partners in the practice, and they said, they ultimately confronted him, and he denied use, and so it said he had only done it once. We conducted an investigation, and at the time we were able to confront him. And here in Arizona, if you have an impairment allegation, you have to go to take a urinalysis within 3 hours of the time you're confronted. And in this case, ultimately, after we interviewed the individual, we found out that he had been passing prescriptions, that he had been writing prescriptions in his wife's name, that he had been stealing oxycodone from his father, a number of other things. Ultimately, he was sent to the Betty Ford Center. And I have a place over in Palm Springs, and I was over there, and I thought, well, I'm sending some folks over here to Betty Ford. I want to get a tour, so I called them
Betty
up.
Ford was in Atlanta.
No, it's in Palm Springs, or Rancho Mirage.
Really?
Yeah, it's affiliated with the Eisenhower Medical Center in Rancho Mirage.
Is that the only one, or is there?
Yeah, it's the only one.
It's in Palm Springs.
Yeah.
I always thought it was
so I had a tour, and I was very impressed. And they have programs for healthcare professionals who have impairment problems. And they, when we got done with it, now I was hoping to run into Lindsay Lohan when I was there, but she wasn't there at the time. But this dentist said he wanted to meet with me, and when he came into the room, I was fearful about what he was going to say to me, but he put out his hand, he shook my hand, and he said, "Thank you. Thank you for confronting me, because I couldn't accept what I was dealing with, and I had no help, and I didn't know where to turn. Because if you guys hadn't confronted me and gotten me over here to change my life, I don't know where I would be."
Maybe
we're doing
Prince
the
would
right
be.
thing.
He'd be where Prince and Michael Jackson. It's sad because those guys were so rich.
Well, I know.
They're insulated from any checks and
It
balances.
is, and nobody wants to challenge them.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, that Michael Jackson, his doctor had so many opportunities to say this guy needs help.
Yeah.
But instead,
I had another situation involving we got a call one morning that there was a young man practicing out in the East Valley, and the dental assistant said that he's drinking beer during the day, and and then we got another call from a patient that said they smelled beer on his breath. We went out, got in the car and went out right there, and we said, "Doc, you're going to have to go pee in a cup in the next 3 hours. What's it going to tell us?" He said that he'd had a beer at lunch, and then he explained, well, what are your drinking habits? And he explained to us at the end of the day. Now, when I walked into this place, this is in 2007, we all know what was happening here in Arizona in 2007. I'm looking at this beautiful dental office with all the latest bells and whistles. And I said, I know why he's drinking. He's trying to keep his head above water here. This man was a young man, was only 28 years old, 2 years out of school. And he had taken on this practice. And he said that at the end of the day, he would have a couple of beers while he was reviewing his charts. And I said, well, when you get to the third beer in the 10th chart, what are you remembering? I said, and then you get in the car and then you drive away. And I said, don't you think that's going to be an issue if you get pulled over? And he had a wife and a child and a mortgage and all these extra pressures. And ultimately, we got him to admit that he took us into his private office and he opened the waste can. There were 8 empties. And this was at 2:30 in the afternoon. We were it's so important to get folks into care and to know that there is a network around them. And this, again, is the Dental Association, because other guys that have been there came back and they kept his practice operating while he was getting his inpatient treatment.
That is so nice.
And that's what it's all about.
But you said it was because it was 2007, the big recession.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it was probably the wife and the kid. What do you think?
I don't know. It depends on whether they're good
So
kids.
tell me this. I want to make one confession on air. I want to run it by the head dog. Do you remember that movie Breaking Bad?
Yes.
Did you ever see it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, it was basically a high school chemistry teacher, and he was making
Money because to pay for his healthcare costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was making medical grade meth, and I guess it was the best meth ever. What I've been doing is taking the Novocaine and converting it to medical grade cocaine and selling it at the back door, making a lot of money.
Really?
But I'm not using it, so is it all legal and good?
Really? I had a medical board case.
I think we should start a new Breaking Bad movie. We should start a new Breaking Bad.
See, this is what I
Move the
aspire
dental
to,
office.
Howard. What I really want to do is I want to take the stories from my board days, and I want to have a reality TV show, such like Law and Order, where you spend the first half hour investigating, and then you spend the second half hour prosecuting, because the stories from my medical board, dental board, chiropractic board days are enough to make what little hair that's on your head standing up. We had I was trying to think of what the case was. It was it was a pharmacy in inner city Newark, and there was a doctor in a storefront a couple doors down, and it was just a card table and a folding chair, and folks would line up at the door, and he would write them prescriptions, and they would go down to the pharmacy, and they would redeem the prescription for a controlled substance. They would bill the Medicaid system. They would then dispense the medication, and the person that was dispensed the medication would go back around to the back of the pharmacy, and they would give them cash. So this was just a big cash machine. And it was a whole network of folks that were going around. Of course, the pharmacist lost his license. The doctor lost his license too on an emergency suspension. But some folks can be pretty creative with a.
Yeah,
with
well,
a
as you get
healthcare
older and
license.
older and older, you just realize that we're all just a bunch of monkeys with clothes on.
Yeah, yeah. So
Humans
I want to
are-
be in
humans
Palm
are
Springs
crazy.
writing scripts for my reality TV show.
I have
no one
no
has ever
idea.
used that as a. As a
Oh
basis
yeah,
for a
yeah.
TV
Palm
show.
Springs is 4 hours from here. It's about the halfway
Yep.
part to the beach.
Yep.
Would you say it's halfway or 2/3?
It's 2/3.
2/3 way to the beach.
Yep.
Love that place. Hey, Kevin, seriously, thank you for all that you do for dentistry.
Oh, you're welcome.
I hope you converted some millennials to realize that it's one of the best investments they can have is keep their profession legal in all 50 states. And
strong.
there's so much. What percent of this stuff do you think those 50 states do are behind the scenes that these guys never even hear about?
Yeah. I would say it's probably about 80%.
Yeah,
of the things that we do.
I know. Every time someone says, they don't do anything, and then you could just rattle off, do you hear about this? Do you hear about that? Do you hear about that? They don't hear.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for everyone in politics because I was thinking of my two older sisters who went into the Catholic nunnery straight out of high school. I mean, my oldest sister, I've been a dentist 30 years. She's been a nun 35 years. I could never change her mind. I mean, what can I say to her to make her Buddhist or Hindu? I mean, and that's the tough thing about politics is it's just really hard to go and negotiate with people who aren't really ready or willing to change your mind.
Yeah.
So thanks for doing it. I would never
You're
want to do
welcome.
it. You're kind of, to me, you're like a pediatric dentist. I'd never want to be a pediatric dentist, and I would never want to run a dental board or a dental association because it's hard to get to a dentist to agree that today is Tuesday. Thanks for all you do.
You're welcome. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
That was
Ryan.
fun.